Good evening and welcome to the Writer's Block. I'm your host, John Ronan, and as you know now in our 23rd year, I interview authors about their craft, what they've done in the past, what they're working on now, what they might have planned for the future. It's a wider net than that, really. We've had on musicians, we've had on actors, we've had on sculptors. So if you have an idea for someone who might fit on the Writer's Block, a writer or another brand of artist, look for our address at the end of the program. We'd be happy to get your suggestion. I also want to mention that we're very proud of this record of 23 years, but this is only one of the shows generated here at Cape Ann TV by and for Cape Anners. It's a wonderful community project made possible by cable contributions. It's not something you get with or by subscribing to Dish. So remember that in the future if the ads start tempting you on television. Tonight, I'm very happy to say we do have an author who's written a very exciting, very visual, and very precise, factual book called The Island Woods about Cape Ann. And I'm going to read you the blurb in the back about the author, Mark Carlotto. Soon after Mark Carlotto moved to Gloucester, he got lost in the woods in the middle of winter while hiking across the Cape from Rockport to his home in Riverdale. Carlotto, who has a PhD in electrical engineering with expertise in satellite imaging, decided to map all of the trails in Dogtown with his GPS. I imagine to make sure he would not get lost again. He spent hundreds of hours following every path and investigating every cellar hole he could find. Carlotto published the Dogtown Guide in 2007, which received a preservation award from the Gloucester Historical Commission the following year. Over time, his explorations have taken him all over the woods of Gloucester and Rockport. The Island Woods, his latest work, maps, photographs, and describes the old settlement, granite quarries, and enigmatic boulders of Cape Ann. Welcome to the Writer's Block, Mark.
Thanks, John.
Thanks for coming down.
Thank you.
This is a very beautiful book. When did you start thinking of the Island Woods?
Well, you know, it actually started, you mentioned the Dogtown Guide. I had written, I'd gotten lost and I started mapping, and then I realized that there was really a lot that wasn't really worked out. There were a lot of loose ends. So I put together, and I brought it along a pretty sizable manuscript. And this was in 2006.
This is before the Dogtown.
Before the Dogtown book.
The Dogtown Guide you brought a copy with.
Right.
And it's mentioned in this book and is also in the bibliography. Why don't I hold up the Dogtown Guide? A nice pocket-size book so that when you're in Dogtown, you can pull it out and find out where you're going. The Dogtown Guide, 2007.
That was published in 2007. And Peter Nastus wrote the foreword to that, which was the purpose of the book really was to sort of answer the mail back in 1985 when he had his Dogtown Advisory Committee. He chaired that, and he said that, you know, a good map and good guide was necessary, and I sort of saw this as the fulfillment of that. But I didn't set out to write the book. I really, like I said, I'd written this manuscript, and it was kind of interesting. I had met Joe Garland for the first time the year before, and I dropped it off to him, and we looked at, you know, we were talking about it, and it was kind of forgotten. He called me a few years ago and asked me if I'd ever published it, which was kind of funny because what happened since then was that I had condensed it into the Dogtown Guide, something that was, you know, you could take around. But there was so much extra material, you know, kind of lying around related to Dogtown. That was really the sort of the start of the Island Woods.
So I'm going to hold up the Island Woods. We'll see more of this beautiful aerial shot that is the cover of Island Woods. The Island Woods, Mark Carlotto. There is the cover. Where's that shot from, Mark?
That shot's in Google Earth. In order not to get in trouble with copyright, the actual image was provided by the Massachusetts GIS. It's a website where you can get geographical data, and I registered that to the imagery and maps in Google Earth and projected that, and then it did a little bit of magic to do the background.
Where can our viewers get the Island Woods?
You can get it at any of the bookstores in Gloucester Bookstore. Yeah, you can get it at Toad Hall in Rockport, at the historical number of places.
And online?
I don't know if it's available online yet. The Dogtown Guide is. I don't know about the Island Woods.
Now, you were good enough to bring some slides.
Right.
This book is very, very visual. A lot of aerials, a lot of maps, a lot of your own original photography.
Right.
And we're going to go to see some of those pictures now. And I'm
Okay.
going to ask Mark to tell us what we're looking at. So first we're going to see the cover photo. And can you add anything to that? Tell us what we're looking at on this Google Earth.
Okay, so yeah,
shot.
again, that's the cover that I just mentioned. I should just finish saying that I had all this material, and in answer to your question, it really took me about a month to write the book because there was a lot of material sitting around, and I kind of put it all together. And my wife said one day, "So did you finish the book?" I said, "Yeah." She says, "You're kidding," and it was like a month it had taken me to do it, but it was like I kind of obsessed on it and just kind of channeled it. I mean, I look at it now, it's like, did I write this thing? Because there's a lot of information there that just kind of came through from a lot of sources all in one place. So, okay, so we're looking at the middle of the Cape here. So if we go to the next slide.
Excuse just a second. What direction are we looking at, and what's the body of water there?
Oh, okay, we're looking north. And
So we're looking across Rockport.
yeah, we're looking north up towards Lanesville, and that's Goose Cove Reservoir.
That's the Goose Cove Reservoir.
Right,
Okay,
right.
good.
Okay.
So now we're ready to look at the second slide.
Okay, so the motivation for doing this is as I explored Dogtown and I completed the Dogtown Guide. I realized that there's really so much more, and the woods really are this connected whole. It's this organic thing. You can't really separate Dogtown from the quarries, from other parts of the island. Back in the 1880s, Thomas Wentworth Higginson wrote that the whole interior of Cape Ann beyond Gloucester is this continuous woodland. Now, I won't read this whole quote here. If you go to the next one, which continues, actually, let me talk about this. So this is an aerial of Cape Ann. You see, there's the coastline, which everyone's familiar with. People, normally come here for the coastline, for swimming and scuba diving and sailing and seafood and all that. Not a lot of people are aware of what's in the middle of the Cape. So if you go to the next chart, continuing his quote, he talks about, and this is again in the late 1800s, that this whole interior is traversed by this network of footpaths, rarely passable for a wagon and not always for a horse, but enabling the pedestrian to go from any one of the villages to any other in a line almost direct and always under an agreeable shade. So these are the old roads that were built by the settlers back in the 1600s and 1700s. So this was really the starting point, and this is kind of the connecting tissue for the book. So if we go to the next chart, here's one of these old maps. This was done by Mason in 1831, and it's kind of rotated a little bit. You'll see why in a minute. But it's a paper map. You can buy them a number of places, antiquarian, book dealers, people that sell maps. And this shows that the middle of the Cape had these roads, these little footpaths, like he says. So if we go to the next chart, what I did was to take that old map and register it to Google Earth, which means just to align it so if you flicker back and forth, you can see that the features pretty much line up. So
you turn this to match the basic structure and layout of the 1831.
Actually, the other way around. I turn the
handwritten.
map to match Google Earth because Google Earth is accurate in a geographical sense. So if we go to the next, so then we flicker back, go back to the image, the Google Earth. Now, if we go to the next one, I think this shows the network of trails. This was something that took me, starting in roughly 2005 and continuing until I would say early last year. Most of these were done with a Garmin GPS, but I actually, towards the end, started using my iPhone because, the technology is actually pretty good. Or it's good enough for this. It's not, we're not, accurate to within meters, but it's accurate to, 10, 20, 30 meters, depending on where you are. And this map shows different types of trails. The yellow are the old roads. So I'm not sure if this is in the sequence. If we go to the next one, or is that the end of the sequence? No, that's the end of it. Okay. So
Okay, that's the end of that sequence. So we'll talk live here for
Okay.
a few minutes and get some more background on that. So you were walking around with a logbook taking readings. Is that how?
well, it's a GPS that records them in a file, and then you can download it to your computer. And then these are little trails of breadcrumbs that you can then put up in Google Earth, and it overlays the actual image or map that you have there. So I took that and combined it with the digitized maps, the Mason map I showed earlier, and then you can kind of see the correspondence. So it's like, okay, this trail corresponds to this old path, and you can kind of get some idea now of what the origin of these trails are, because it's a real rat's nest of trails in the island woods. Some of them are pretty wide, but there's a lot of really small, narrow ones.
I've gotten turned around in the Cape myself.
I still do. Yeah.
Now, when you are registering a GPS and creating a file, is that longitude, latitude
Right.
to 20 digits?
You have to ask me this. I think it's to like 5 or 6 digits to the right of the decimal point, which is about 10 meters accuracy. So this is how I compiled, the trail map, or which is a bunch of GPS readings that you have to edit because some of them aren't good, and you have to go out several times if you have dropouts. There's a lot of technical issues, but that's kind of how I put the raw material for this together. That was sort of the geographical base of the book.
I want to show the books. We've been looking at some of the electronics here. I want to show some of the images in the book, from the book, so you can see how the book is organized. It's extremely visual, and the prints are very, very high quality, with Mark's prose fitting in around the graphics. I'll get my fingers out of the way there if I can. How do you see this book being used, and for whom is it targeted?
Oh, that's a good question. I haven't really thought about that. I think it's really intended to give people that live here, as well as visitors, an appreciation for what we have. I think it's pretty unique. I mean, I've traveled a little bit, enough to really appreciate, when I come home from a trip, I really appreciate being home in Gloucester, and the woods are a big part of that. And it's important, I think, to make this information available, because there's activities now where they want to expand an industrial park or put a road in from Rockport over to Blackburn, so that people in Rockport can they don't have to deal with the traffic. But this is the old Rockport Road controversy, which keeps popping up every now and then. I think if people have an appreciation for these woods, and that they are this connected whole, and it's historical, it's also watershed. So, and that's really why it's existed in this form for so long, because it's protected. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people have bought up, a lot of organizations have bought up land, and so it's added to that. And the city is also buying parcels. Part of what I did was I made my maps available to the city early on, to help them determine sort of what areas had to be better mapped, because there is a lot of interest in preserving the open space. And so a lot of people see that as valuable. And so I kind of wanted to put everything kind of in one place, with all the the maps and the information and the pictures. The pictures are an important part. There's you pointed out, or you had one there with the stone bridge over at Flatledge in Rockport, the quarry there, and that is there's a number of photos, sort of now and then, showing how the landscape has changed, and it's just interesting.
We do have a few more lined up, and we can talk a little bit more of that, because I think we do have some of those contrasting photographs.
Okay.
So we have a second series. If our director Andrew Love would put that up, and he did. Tell us, Mark, what this graphic is.
Okay. So I should maybe just say that the book is kind of organized into a section early on about the sort of the old roads and trails, which we talked about. Then there's a chapter on Dogtown, and there's some well-known information and some new stuff in that chapter, and it's not all totally worked out. I get a lot of feedback from readers, so it's kind of an ongoing project. This is north of Dogtown. This is the continuation of the trail system north of Dogtown into the North Woods, and this shows the quarries. Those are the blue icons that are scattered around, quarries and motions. And so this is sort of the middle part of the book, and I mentioned some of these now and then photos, which honestly the Rockport Historical or Sandy Bay Historical Society was really helpful. I did a lot of research there, and they were very helpful in helping me find some of these old photos. So these, the quarries now, a lot of them, up in Lanesville, they're privately owned, so it's really hard to get to them. But the ones over in Rockport, Carlson's and Flatledge and Steel Derrick, you can get to them. There's a lot of interesting stuff around there, and that's documented in the book. And again, this network of trails connects you to Dogtown and to the Babson Boulders and everything else. In the middle of the Cape, so it's
By
pretty,
the Babson
pretty cool.
boulders, you mean the carved
Right.
the carved boulders with the guidance on life.
Right. Right.
So if we go to the next graphic, please.
Okay.
We'll see we're on the ground now.
Right. So this is a current photo of Flatledge looking east towards Rockport. And then if you go to the next one, is that same, almost that exact same view taken in the late 1800s.
When the quarry was active.
Right. So I like to flicker back and forth, but I won't make your, your director's doing that. So you can get an idea. You can see there are some structures. There's that house there, which I think might be, I don't know if it's an inn on Granite Street. But you flicker back and forth, you can see it in both images.
And there's no water when they're active because they're pumping like mad.
Pumped it out
to keep it dry so that they can be working in it.
Right, right. So now this is one of the Rockport reservoirs. If you go to the next one, this is Steel Derrick, and then if you go back, or go forward, I should say, and that's how it looked in the 1800s.
And which was the source for these again?
Sandy Bay Historical.
Sandy Bay.
And the photos I took myself.
So the contemporary photos are yours, and Sandy Bay Historical was the source for the 1880 active quarry shots.
So I looked at these photos and I thought, okay, so where were these taken? And then I tried to find the spot without falling into the quarry to take it. So it's pretty close. And there's a few others in the book too. It kind of gives you an appreciation again for how things have changed, and it's the same place that we're living, but it was back then it was quite different. It's very very industrial. There's a lot of activity, a lot of machinery, and the landscape was totally different.
Noise.
A lot of noise.
I've talked to people who think the quarries were always swimming holes and just sort of accidentally appeared.
Yeah.
Is that the end of this sequence?
I don't know.
Is there another one? I asked our director. Is that the end of the sequence?
I think that might be the end of that one. Yeah.
I want to ask you a couple background questions.
Sure.
How long have you been in Gloucester, and what was the process of clearly falling in love with it as you have? Or Cape Ann, I should say. Be broader net here.
I've lived here for 9 years, and I moved here because my wife, she wasn't my wife at the time, we since got married, lived here. She raised her kids here and loved loved Cape Ann and Gloucester. I was looking to move, and she says, "Oh, you really need to look at this house," and the house we live in right now, which is literally on the border of Dogtown. And I said, "Why?" She says, "Oh, it's right next to Dogtown." It's like, well, what's Dogtown? I had no idea. And so I moved here without really knowing, and I'd go jogging around the reservoir a few times a week, and I noticed these trails kind of leading off into the woods, and I started to wonder about them. And then, as you read in the intro, I got lost in the winter. I dropped my car off over in Rockport, and I thought I'd just kind of hike across the Cape. It was in January, and I got lost with a friend's GPS that didn't work. And that kind of led to the curiosity then. But I had no idea really up until that point where I lived, and it's only been sort of it's unfolded over time. My fascination and love for the place. It's very, very special.
There are a number of people, I'm among them, who somewhat accidentally came to Gloucester and then knew about 24 hours later they were never going to leave. I want to follow up with another question, another background personal question. You have a doctorate in electrical engineering.
Right.
You're an electrical engineer,
right.
But you are by interest a naturalist. How do those interests and occupations mesh?
Well, when I was younger, I was really interested in the future. I was interested in space, and I've written books on Mars and things like that. And
It's an exciting time for you then, huh?
Well,
with curiosity up there.
Well, but it isn't because the future didn't really work out the way I had hoped. I figured by now there'd be colonies on the moon, and it's not likely to be any colonies on the moon or Mars in my lifetime. So it's like, okay, so let's be more practical. And over time, as you get older, I think you get interested in archaeology and things that are older and the continuity of things. And so I've done a little traveling, and when I came here, I realized, oh my God, I'm interested a little in archaeology, and there's a lot of really cool archaeological stuff, in my backyard that I could just go for a hike and get some exercise, get out from behind the computer, and have some fun and learn, and maybe discover something. There's always that. You always want to discover something cool, so it's kind of unfolded that way.
So you work as an electrical engineer,
right?
And you migrated from futurism to archaeology.
I went from the future to the past.
For the future to the past, but you still exist and work in both
sort of
periods.
I try to stay in the present.
It's not easy to do.
Right.
I got the 5-minute signal from Kate about 2 minutes ago.
Okay.
So I want to begin to wrap up. I want to thank you for this book, Mark. It's true that there's been a great deal on Dogtown, but it's mostly centered on Dogtown, not the whole expanse of the island. And this covers the whole island. I think you've done a real service. I'm going to hold the book up again so that the title and the picture can be imprinted on our thousands of viewers' eyes, and they can go out, and get my fingers out of the way, go out and buy The Island Woods by Mark Carlotto, a very, very striking book, and a book that should be on every Cape Ann bookshelf. Thanks for being on the Writer's Block, Mark.
Thanks a lot, John. My pleasure.
I appreciate it, and I'm glad I found out about your book. I've enjoyed it very much.
Thanks.
I want to thank our television viewers for being with us on the Writer's Block this evening. If you've learned something about where we live and its past and its beauty, and maybe been tempted to explore more of that because of the Island Woods, then the Writer's Block has done its job. Thanks again for being with us, and I hope to see you again next week on the Writer's Block. Good night.